All right. Well, welcome in everyone who's jumping in nice and early, right at the 1 o'clock Eastern time mark. We're not going to get started for just a couple minutes. We had one of our largest registration numbers yet on these webinars. So I want to give people a chance to jump in for myself and Stephane, who I'll introduce in a second. For those that have jumped in right on time and or early, just so you guys know, your camera's off, your mic is off. However, you do have chat and Q&A functions, so please familiarize yourself with that in front of you. We do want to make sure you're able to engage with us. I'm going to have the chat open to myself as well as the Q&A, so please make sure you engage with us if you have any questions throughout the webinar. Also, the webinar is going to be recorded, so this recording will be sent out to everyone that has registered and or joined, as well as some of the slides and documentation and information that we're going to be talking about today. But sit tight, grab some water. We're probably going to get started in just around a minute from now. While we're waiting to get started, Julie or Emma, a quick question around Q&A and chat, just making sure that the panelists, that the audience can leverage the chat for questions. I don't see a Q&A specifically. It's the only reason why I'm asking.
There's a Q&A at the bottom of everyone's screen.
There is. Okay, awesome.
I'm not sure about the chat, though.
All good. No, so if you're in the audience, please use the Q&A. Julie and Emma, since for some reason my Zoom update didn't give me the Q&A on the webinar today, if you can just add some of the questions into the webinar chat to myself, I'll make sure I monitor that as we go on. All right, for those that are still filtering in, we're just going to get started in around 30 seconds. If you did just join us, you are in the right spot for the SDVoE and OpenAV Cloud conversation between myself and Stephane. We're going to get started in just a second. Your video is off, your mic is off, but again, please use the Q&A section to engage with us and ask some questions throughout our conversation today. All right, we're just at the mark. Stephane, you good to go?
I'm good.
All right, beautiful. Well, guys, I know this is the third time I'm thanking for some of those that came online right at time, but apologies. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. We have a really interesting conversation today. Hopefully you're in the right spot. We're going to be talking about today about how standards are reshaping the audiovisual industry. This is going to be a unique webinar in our series here at Xyte. We're going to be more fireside chat than anything related to presentation today. Yes, we do have slides. We want to set the stage and set the conversation between myself and our special guest, Stephane. But really the majority of today is going to be an open conversation, which means that your questions are even that much more important to ensuring that we are talking about what you guys are asking about or thinking about or planning for. But the focus of today, again, is going to be very clearly about how the standards are reshaping this audiovisual industry. For those that are maybe joining a webinar here in our series of webinars monthly for the first time and don't know who I am, I'm Andrew Gross. I run our global sales team here at Xyte out of our US headquarters, right outside of Midtown Manhattan in a town called Hoboken. If you guys haven't heard about Xyte before, we are the single pane of glass for monitoring and management of all AV systems, regardless of vendors, regardless of manufacturers, regardless of really AV IT device. So really focusing around the interoperability of management and monitoring in the cloud. But today I welcome our special guest, Stephane Tremblay. And Stephane, why don't I let you introduce yourself and a little bit about the AptoVision department of Semtech.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. So as Andrew said, I am Stephane Tremblay, which happens to be the inventor of this technology, this SDVoE technology. Was the co-founder of AptoVision, the company that got acquired by Semtech. So since acquisition in 2017, I am the CTO of the business unit, and I'm also president of the SDVoE Alliance. So Semtech is a semiconductor company, is very well known in cellular IoT solutions, circuit protection, smart sensing, power management, signal integrity, wireless RF, broadcast video, and professional AV. So quite diversified as a company, but today we're talking about mostly the professional AV side of this business.
Amazing. Thank you. And seriously, thank you again for joining us. I think the audience is going to get a lot about from you on your take on this industry and really everything related to standards. So what are we talking about today? I keep mentioning it's going to be a fireside chat. So what are we going to be chatting about? Well, we're going to kick off the conversation quickly. Stephane's going to give you guys a little bit of a history around SDVoE. That's going to set our stage because SDVoE is a long established standard in this audiovisual world. And it is absolutely iterating itself to be forward-thinking and preparing you as a manufacturer, as a reseller, and as an end user for the future, which Stephane and I are going to talk about. But let's set the stage first. We're going to talk a little bit about today's modern AV challenges, a little bit about how standards are supporting innovation, both in the manufacturing side and the services side. And then we're going to wrap up and talking a little bit about what the future holds. And I know everyone has been asking and been talking about what does it mean for AI and AV? We're going to be having a great little chat around what that looks like as well. So without further ado, Stephane, let me hand it to yourself. Let's give the audience a little bit of a background about SDVoE, because this sets the stage for any conversation as it relates to standards and interop in the AV space.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. So let's start with what SDVoE stands for. SDVoE means Software-Defined Video over Ethernet. So SDVoE is an alliance of non-profit organizations. So we are a bunch of companies to promote the adoption of Ethernet for AV. But the way we promote it is by having AV needs that are software-defined, which makes it very important for the evolution of AV, let's say. So please, next slide. So the AV business started a while ago, and whenever back then you had multiple inputs and multiple outputs or display, and you needed to switch from one input to another, you had a piece of equipment called a matrix switch. We've done decades with that technology. So matrix switch is just an appliance that takes some inputs and route to some outputs. It was obviously good at that time, but very limiting in terms of interoperability, in terms of future-proofing. So this is how I started this concept of having AV over IP for Pro AV. And in 2017, SDVoE Alliance introduced SDVoE technology, which is AV over IP, but really targeting to replace the matrix switch. Because AV over IP started before that. One could say, yeah, I had an iPhone in 2013 and I could see some video on my iPhone. Yes, back then, those AV over IP solutions were highly compressed with lots of latency. What SDVoE is changing to that mix, it's a technology to replace the matrix switch in the sense that there's no compression and there's no delay. The latency on SDVoE is incomparable to any other technology. Next slide, please. So SDVoE is a technology, as we said, to replace the matrix switch, but also many other topologies in Pro AV. So for example, it can replace typical matrix switch, but doing it over IP. It can also do video wall. It can also do multi-viewer. Multi-viewer is when you have many different inputs that are displayed on the same physical display. We also support advanced operations like KVM. KVM, the traditional KVM from one user to one PC, but also the more advanced functionalities where you can have a power user driving many PCs, or the collaborative mode where you can have many users driving only one host PC. This is highly advanced, and the most important thing to note is regardless of your AV needs, the topology behind is always the same. You have an SDVoE transmitter at every source, an SDVoE receiver at every display. In the middle, it's all connected via Ethernet, and that's it. You can do nearly all AV installations using SDVoE with the same topology. The rest, what defines the application, is driven by our API. So please go to next slide. The API is very important for today's conversation. This is the breakthrough. This is what's enabling, let's say, cloud-based architecture, because what the API is bringing is interoperability and ease of use. So our API, by the way, that is developed and maintained by Semtech, is controlling everything underneath. So if you were to look at your right, you have the SDVoE API that sits in between the endpoints or the hardware and the software on top. And the API really takes care of everything. This is what makes sure that you have interoperability between vendors, you have the discovery going on, you have the remote update if you want. So all this is done by this maintained API by Semtech. Next slide, please. So the analogy with the PC world for our API would be like the Microsoft operating system, right? The reason today why it's so easy to take a ThinkPad IBM notebook and print on an HP printer, being two different companies, is because you have an operating system that takes care of it, that takes care of different hardware. Where SDVoE API is the same thing as the Microsoft OS, but for Pro AV. You have device underneath that we call hardware and peripherals. SDVoE sits in between the application and control layer to offer a common interface for everyone. So with our API, the hardware is agnostic. You don't need to care about what's really underneath as long as you talk to the API, just like the Microsoft operating system would do for you.
And I think this slide, Stephane, is a great way to kind of explain where everything fits in the AV-IT kind of ecosystem at the enterprise user, right? Because the same way that they're looking at their estate of MDM management for computer screens and laptops and printers and servers, they are now more than ever beginning to look at that same sort of ecosystem for their now mission critical rooms and meeting spaces, right? The cameras, the front of room display, the touch screens, and of course the AV over IP distribution of content. And SDVoE as a standard is supporting this type of interoperability, very similar to how you would compare it to that Microsoft operating system, but as an API to this single application and control for the customer, bringing things together under a single umbrella for every need that they may have. And I think that that is enormous. There was one question, Stephane, that came through during your presentation. I'd love to ask it right now, actually. It was a question about, they wanted to confirm that the SDVoE XMTR and RX are encoders and decoders. Is that correct?
Yes, they are.
All right, perfect. Glad we could answer that one. So I think where this brings us now, Stephane, is one last slide before I think we have our quick chat about this conversation. And what that is really around what today's challenge is. And I think SDVoE, being such an established standard today in this industry, has brought us through with that timeline evolution that you showed, through 2017 with this AV over IP requirement, and addressed that challenge. And obviously, Semtech with SDVoE is constantly addressing future challenges. And what we're seeing here, even at Xyte, is that a lot of this modern AV ecosystems are comprised still, of course, of this multi-brand, multi-vendor environment, beyond just AV over IP. But even more so is that this multi-brand, multi-vendor environment is having further requirements to integrate into other platforms, not just each other, but also to other RMM systems and facility management requirements and room booking platforms and CMS. I mean, the list goes on and on. And this, I think, is probably the best time. Let me stop sharing my screen to kind of start this conversation, because what this gets us to is what is happening today, right? You know, the 2017 requirement of an AV over IP standard brought about the need to establish the SDVoE standard. But Stephane, I'll ask you this first question. You know, what challenges, on top of kind of what we just spoke about, what challenges do you see today in emerging around interoperability, particularly in these mixed environments where you have AV, IT, and now cloud systems that must seamlessly integrate?
You're right, Andrew. It must interoperate all together. This is the most important criteria to get evolution, advanced software like cloud-based control, like AI. One thing that was missing before, everyone had their own protocol, their own way of tackling, let's say this device would change video source and this, which was preventing higher level software to take place because it was too complex, right? In order to get evolution, in order to get more done, you need to have piece of software to control, to really establish what it is controlling. Just like the Microsoft operating system will control your PC. That's it, that's done. You don't need to care about, okay, do I have an AMD processor or it's an Intel processor? Don't even bother about it. Well, same thing took place with SDVoE. SDVoE and its API is there to provide a layer that abstract the hardware underneath, which makes, let's say, for example, in your case, cloud-based control way easier. I'm not saying it would be completely impossible, but it simplified the task so much. And this what will turn the innovation and continue to progress the AV platform. You all know that in order to keep up and do something great, we have to embrace the IT world, right? The Ethernet industry is the industry that defines the infrastructure for everything electronic worldwide. So we have to embrace that. If we want to have AV to succeed and embrace the higher level like AI, we need to switch everything over Ethernet and make it simple, where our API is making it simple.
That brings up a good point, Stephane. And I think you mentioned it briefly, but I think there's this misconception out there, especially around the manufacturing community, that these standards or alliances hinder innovation. How would you address that if somebody had that mindset that, oh, if everyone's, you know, designing to a single standard, well, then how do I differentiate? How do I innovate faster?
Yeah, there's you're right. There's unfortunately, there's a misconception from some of the vendors. They think that by going open standards, they will lose their differentiator, they will open up for competition, but that's not the way to view it. The way to view it is to say, if I'm going to go open standards, I will have, for example, third-party companies like Xyte that will offer a cloud-based control interface that will make my platform, that will make my product so much more usable. I will be able to do so much more because of third-party companies. I'll give you a great analogy, Andrew. The Apple, when they designed the iPhone, for example, they say, we want an appliance that can run application. And fast forward to today, I can order a taxi by taking my iPhone and ordering Uber, and a guy show up in his Toyota Corolla 5 minutes after. Well, this is not driven by Apple. This was, in that case, Uber, another company that created an application because the platform was open. Well, this is what you should be thinking, right? Device vendors should think, okay, if my platform is open, I will create more with it.
And that's a great point for the manufacturers on the line that are thinking about innovating their own lines, and looking maybe even towards standards as an innovation inflection point where they may not have the ability for that specific product today. Maybe it is closed off, but innovation can be seen as actually opening it up. It may seem small to the manufacturer, but it's massive to the customer and the customer's customer, right? The reseller and integrator down to the end user. Which brings me to my next question to you, Stephane, is, we talked a little bit about how standards can support the manufacturer in innovation and can then potentially deliver better outcomes. How does this now in the AV space, how does it protect customers in this ever-evolving AV technology world where we see tech moving at a faster pace today because of this AV IT convergence than we ever saw before?
Yep. So as you said, it's going over IT infrastructure, so you have to embrace it. And by embracing it, what the benefit you get out of it is, number one, you're future-proof, because the minute you go SDVoE, you become vendor agnostic, right? If you buy products from vendor A and vendor A is dying, for example, then you can switch to vendor B, no problem. So it protects your future investment. It makes it more scalable too, because, for example, if you have a matrix switch, you're limited to that many input by that many output. You have one more input, you're done. You're maxed out. You have to replace the whole system. Whereas when you go IT, there's never such a problem, right? You can always add more port. That's the nature of an IT system, is that it is expendable. All these infrastructures are based on IT gears, the Ethernet switches and routers, and that's the way our AI is driven. Cloud-based control is driven with that infrastructure as well. So we have to embrace and we have to benefit out of it.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, everything that you guys have done up until now and setting the stage for standards being a benefit to all three legs of the AV stool, for manufacturers, for innovation, to resellers to support their installs, and the customers to future-proof, as you just said, all kind of related around interop. And with SDVoE constantly changing and meeting customers' demands, I think this brings us to kind of our next conversation point. I want to quickly reshare my screen, Stephane, before we have another chat, but I want to now move this conversation into the cloud. We had kind of, if you recall, I like recalling back that slide you had of that timeline of like, we had this clear issue, then we had clear demand, and then we had a clear solution with SDVoE, from matrix to multi-vendor AV over IP to a standard to support them all together. We're seeing the same in the cloud, right? And that's happening today, where we've got these vendors and manufacturers who have developed amazing products, but they all communicate in a silo. And customers and resellers are looking to do more. They're looking to have interoperability, but from a management and integration standpoint. They're looking to get better data aggregation around it. And that's where this new standard, off of the coattails of SDVoE, I must say, has started to pop up. And I'm proud to say that Xyte is a founding member of this, along with amazing manufacturers, in founding this standard and alliance called the OpenAV Cloud. And the OpenAV Cloud has very clear missions. You guys, I highly recommend go to openav.cloud today to learn a little bit more. But just to give the audience a quick overview of like the 5 key points about what this standard is all about, is first things first, it's all about customers. It's focusing on giving customers the flexibility to choose the manufacturer and device from the vendors that they enjoy, to give value from the manufacturers and vendors and hardware that they choose to be in their environments, very similar to what SDVoE is doing. 2 is a commitment to open APIs, right? Everything should be read, write, and every vendor that is part of the standard commits to offering, read, write, and developing and maintaining those APIs to allow cross-platform interoperability. 3 is data access, right? It's one thing to buy a great piece of hardware, install it, and hope it works, but let's confirm it works, and let's see what's going on over time. 4th is security and privacy. I know we had a question about security and privacy, and Stephane, I'm going to return to you on that. later on in this presentation when we wrap up about it. So for the person that asked it, we'll address it shortly. And fifth is industry-wide inclusion. It's meant to be for everyone, from hardware providers to software providers and everybody in between. The standard is meant to do everything that you said, Stephane, just previously about what SDVoE was about and supported, was around ensuring interoperability, ensuring innovation, and bringing value from today and into tomorrow for the customers and the reseller community. So let's talk a little bit about this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so the audience can see us again. I'm going to bring this to you again, Stephane, to kind of kick us off. But let's merge the two. How do you see SDVoE working with these, or how do you see this OpenAV working with established standards like SDVoE, and where can it add value to those three legs of the stool without reinventing the wheel?
Easy, Andrew. I think one does not go without the other. So, for example, cloud-based control platform, right? Xyte, it's an expert in that. It needs a predictable, standardized way to communicate with the device. Whether you be accessing a device next to you on your desk or across the globe, you need a standardized way. You need to make sure that devices are interoperable and accessible. In terms of AI, for example, you require data structures that are consistent, because this is how AI works. It collects data, analyzes data, and do inference with it. But what if you have closed system and you don't have this consistent feeds of data? Well, the algorithm wouldn't work, right? So we need to work together, because I would say I'm an engine, you are a transmission, or put it in any order you want, but one does not go without the other. We provide this abstraction layer that higher level piece of software will benefit from, the fact that it is extracted. And to go in the sense of the question that came up in the feed, once you are extracted and you are over the IT infrastructure, that also means tons of things, that you are accessible from remote, you are protected, you have all the security measures in place, you play well with IT managers. So providing the SDVoE API, it's yes about making things simple for the users, but also to provide all the tools an IT manager will need, to provide all the security levels that are required, because sometimes you sit on the same IT as the office IT, right? So it needs to be according to these standards. SDVoE is there to address that. We have encryption in between the box, encryption of the payload. There's a secure mechanism from the API to the device, and then from the API to the upper layer, which is the control software. It is handled like you would handle, if you are an IT manager, just a user PC. If I'm putting a user PC on my network, I make sure it is secure. I make sure there's no entry point for violations. And this is the way it operates over IT. SDVoE is the same approach.
Yeah, I think let's double click a little bit on what you just mentioned about open APIs. I think it's a good topic. I'll roll a couple questions into one, but feel free to address them as you go. But in general, what are some misconceptions about open APIs in AV systems? Where are the benefits and the detriments? But also, how is this supporting and enabling organizations who very clearly are going more cloud native? And I think this does kind of go back to your security conversation. But it really is a bunch of questions built into one. But around open APIs, just to summarize it for you, Stephane, what kind of misconceptions, tricks of the trade, but also where do you see it supporting these cloud native environments all around the open API environment?
this will be everywhere, by the way, Andrew. It's I think it's just the evolution. The fact that it's not like this today is because we didn't have the tools to make it like that, right? Previously, I came back to my first slide about the evolution of Pro AV. When you had the matrix switch appliance, the matrix switch was not connected on Ethernet. It was custom made for in installation. If you had a matrix switch and you needed to have a multi-viewer, you needed to have a physical box which was acting as a multi-viewer with its own driver, its own language, which was very often two different companies, and it was so cumbersome just to make it work at the site you were installing it. You would have software programmer working on site for days, if not weeks, just to make this site work. Forget about having this site working across the entire globe with other sites. It was completely impossible. Now with SDVoE, we enable that. So because we enable that, we enable higher pieces of software, higher use of the technology. Just like you mentioned, cloud control. This is very advanced. You access your device wherever you are. Just like 20 years ago, you were a company. You needed to have some network capability for your company. You would hire an IT manager, then buy some Ethernet switches and do your provision locally. This is my rack. Today, it doesn't work like that. Today, it is virtualized. You call the internet provider, you call the service company, and you said, I need this application to work, and they virtualize a network for your need. Well, this is what is this is what's on the table by enabling that. So I think, yeah, lots of benefit by opening up. We just start to see the tip of the iceberg in terms of Pro AV evolution.
Yeah, and this is a perfect lead into a couple questions, actually, Stephane, that we got from the audience. I'll address the first one. It was a question about interop when it comes to video conferencing systems with, say, in-room mics and speakers. The question is twofold. Standard, obviously, we're talking about two main standards here with SDVoE and OpenAV. I'll address it on the OpenAV Cloud standpoint is, where we're focused on in this standard and what Xyte is supporting and developing to this standard called OpenAV Cloud is this central repository for monitoring and management and collection of data for all of those VC systems and the actual in-room mics and speakers. So we're bringing everything, regardless of the communication methods, through the open APIs that we're committing to as part of the standards, into a single place for gathering and reporting and management. But Stephane, on your end, I mean, where do you see SDVoE playing a part in that kind of environment when you have this VC and multimedia kind of room that is prevalent throughout these different enterprise spaces?
So in fact, we have tons of installations like this using the SDVoE technology. And the clear benefit is, well, number one, you have access to your resource wherever you are. So for example, if you do a university with many campuses, right? You have SDVoE transmitter and receiver in lecture halls, and you interconnect your campus because it can be interconnected. It is Ethernet technology. So you just interconnect all your buildings, all your rooms together, and this is how you can share video content. And it's like becoming a network of AV, but not a network of computers, but in that case, it's a network of endpoints and AV. It simplifies the problem quite a bit. So for example, if you have a high-profile speaker showing up at a university, let's say Barack Obama is coming up to do a speech, the rooms you have available, none of them are big enough to accommodate this big crowd that wants to attend. So what you do is, if you are interconnected with the AV network I'm describing, you can send people everywhere to all the rooms in the universities. and everyone will see the same feed, and everyone can ask questions because it's also bi-directional, and you control where the video flow is going in and out. So it's quite more advanced. Previously, you wouldn't be able to do such an installation, for example.
Exactly. And I saw a couple other questions I want to address before we move on to our next topic. There was one about the future of SDVoE. We're going to address that very shortly, so hold on to that one very quickly. But Stephane, another question came up, and I think it's important that we address in very simple terms is how SDVoE and OpenAV Cloud are able to work together to provide a better experience for the customer. And just to kind of say it in summary for the audience is, you have these companies like Semtech and Xyte who are part of these standards like SDVoE and OpenAV Cloud. One does not replace the other, but in fact work together to provide a better overall solution to the customer, even in their own verticals. And the way that works is very similar to what Stephane has been talking about is you as the customer, the reseller, the integrator, whoever it may be, you want to look at your space and decide what technology is best for this environment and not have to worry about how they're talking to each other. SDVoE comes into play, right? With that great example of that multicast of different rooms and supporting these, high profile speakers and really kind of leveling up the AV installation because you have this interoperability between technology. On the other side of the coin, with this OpenAV Cloud standard, it's the same idea when it comes to data gathering, monitoring, and management. So while SDVoE supports the interop of communication and integration to these systems to level up your system, the OpenAV Cloud standard allows the interoperability between these devices to give you visibility. To that Barack Obama example, ensure that before Barack Obama walks in, that all the systems are online because you got monitoring and management of every one of those systems. To then after Barack Obama leaves that room, to then gain data about the system. What was the gain on the mic, the volume used over time? Maybe there were 4 speakers in that room over the year. Tell me about how all these systems worked together. So you have these 2 value-added standards of which all the amazing hardware manufacturers now are able to innovate to, but bring a collection of those hardware manufacturers as a single standard for 2 very unique use cases that work together to your customer. That's really the key between these 2 standards that I think is just so wonderful. And Stephane, what that gets me to, because I think we've done a great job talking about, what is happening today and where are these standards addressing these open needs. Let's talk a little bit about tomorrow. And I know it's weird to say tomorrow because AI is here today. But I think we're seeing adoption. Obviously, it's going to be a slow roll before a large enterprise is 100% fully AI integrated. So let me set the stage quickly, and then I got a couple other questions for you. But as we look forward with AI and AV, what does this really mean? I think there's a lot of noise around there about how this brings true value to the customer. We're hearing, at least here at Xyte and the OpenAV Cloud standard, vendors that are a part of that standard are hearing a lot of things around self-healing, learning, right? Like how are rooms being used differently than others and having preset configs, detecting anomalies, reading through quick start guides, and querying chat bots. These are very common AI today use cases that I believe a lot of these enterprises are going to adopt. Now, how does that relate to us, right, in the standards world? Well, the ability to adopt all of these different types of AI, we'll call them empowerment tools, right, or efficiency tools, is really only possible if you adopt a standard. Because AI isn't powerful if you have one box living in a silo or one box being managed in a silo. AI is only powerful when you have interoperability and everything is talking to each other, because now you have the full picture, regardless of manufacturer, that can feed data into that AI engine. That's where the big power lies. So if you're looking or thinking about how am I, as a decision maker in my company, whether I make products, resell and integrate products, or use AV-IT products, AI anything is only going to be possible through interoperability and the adoption of standards. And where does that kind of take us? Well, what that takes us looking forward is this AI 2.0 transformation that we're truly seeing here. And I'm just going to tease this out here for a second. But there's this, this incredible influencer out there in the VC world, Patrick Salyer from Mayfield Ventures. It's a very big fund in the world there for large disruptive technology companies. And what he was talking about in a big LinkedIn post was about how if he were running a legacy hardware SaaS company, he wouldn't be sleeping much. And the reason why is because what we're seeing today is this AI 1.0, which is really just, kind of like Copilot, ChatGPT bolt-ons, right? It's a great demo. It does add value, but it's small impact. However, AI 2.0, the future even of AI, I know it sounds crazy, we're even talking the future of AI, but the future of AI is AI 2.0, which is this full stack reinvention, but focusing on from the ground up, how is AI going to bring value to my everyday? Almost rethinking how systems work together, interop together, and are really now AI built instead of AI bolted on. And that's going to be the next big transformation. However, and let me unshare my screen so we can talk about this right now, Stephane. None of this is possible, right? None of this is possible unless you have a level of interoperability and communication amongst the many, 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 many hardware vendors out there that are building to this AI 1.0 and 2.0. So let me start this off with a question to you, is specifically around, SDVoE in the standard. How are you guys preparing for this next wave of innovation in AI and AV?
As you put it so well, Andrew, none of this is possible. AI relies on the fact that everything is interconnected. The data is available. The data is structured. The data is consistent. The device can react and provide, right? So this is exactly what we do. The SDVoE API is meant to do that. It's meant to be a layer where AI can bolt on, query, do actions, collect data. This is how we are preparing. Are we the AI innovator? Not at all. But are we the tool to make AI a reality? Definitely. It's like we are a wrench pipe provider to a plumber. This is what we are.
And do you see AI though? And maybe this is to your analogy that you drew, but like, do you see AI as something that standards should be defining and shaping, or should standards be open to accommodate this like AI innovation as it continues to unfold? Where do you see the role?
Of course. We need standards. This is the only way to provide higher level application. We need to abide by standards. And of course, these standards needs to be IT driven, because when you talk about AI, you also talk about IT, right? Any PC, regardless if you do central processing AI or edge AI, you always assume some kind of IT structures behind it to run it. So my goal is to have SDVoE being the standards of that is adopted at 100% in Pro AV. This is the goal. I want to make it so that it's trivial to use the API and control the Pro AV networks. This is my goal. And yet the evolution of SDVoE is about supporting those new IT standards, those new security practice, those new type of installations, like, for example, after the pandemic, as you mentioned in the conference room, this market exploded and created some new requirements. Today, for example, you have audio that is tracked based on who is the speaker. You have the same thing for the camera. The camera will detect who is speaking and zoom in on the speaker at the time. This is advanced behaviors that we need to work on, that we need to enable and make sure that it is ready to be IT compatible. So it's really about thinking future-proof, thinking to be IT driven and cloud driven from the get-go, and not as an afterthought saying, oh, I have this great technology. How can I write a driver so the Xyte software can connect onto my hardware? I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's really cumbersome and limiting the possibilities.
Yeah, if we're going to talk cloud native, you got to be cloud native from the get-go. I think that's great, because it only just enables more of that. And I know we're using this term, future-proof, and it just enables it more and more. One last question for you, Stephane. I know we're running up on time here. I want to make sure we get to the questions from the audience. The last one I got for you is any use cases that you see this today, anything that excites you when you think about, open standards and even just emerging AI capabilities.
The first time, SDVoE a couple of years ago, the first time we had some real AI project with SDVoE was for a medical application. That was maybe 4 years ago. It was, well, 4 years ago was the introduction, but now it's way more advanced. It is helping the surgeon in the operating room. So SDVoE, as you know, is a great distribution system and a great API to be in an operating room, being completely uncompressed, no latency. And today, for example, if a surgeon is performing an operation in your knee, he has a camera, an endoscopic camera, for example, and the surgeon will perform an operation, but in order for him to be even better at what he's doing, he will have some AI algorithms to help him perform the operation. So telling him where to cut, let's say you have cancer cell to eliminate, where is the cancer cell, etc., etc. So the first time this technology was deployed, there were 2 API chosen for that. The NVIDIA API, because NVIDIA is the leading company for AI, and the SDVoE API. Both API were complete, easy to use, and integrated well together.
And I know that's a medical application, but it has extreme parallels to the AV IT space, right? You just simply replace that example of, instead of a surgeon, it's an IT director. Instead of an operating room, it's a conference room. But you can see the benefits that world only was able to really uncover because those systems were able to you leverage their open APIs and communicate together and then feed together into an AI system to support that surgeon, i.e. the IT director, right? I mean, it's different world, but exact parallels to how we're going to see it in this AV IT world start to unfold of open APIs, supporting innovation, and bringing better value to everyone in the value chain in that ecosystem as these AI demands increase. I think it's a fantastic example, Stephane. It's wonderful. With that, I do want to get to our last slide here because we've got getting some questions about what's next. Where do I find some information? We had a lot of great questions come through as well. Can you tell everyone on the audience a little bit about where they can learn more, both from a security standpoint, about the standard, and kind of what's coming next with SDVoE?
Yeah, sure. So SDVoE is really doubling down on putting some great course to not only explain the technology, but also explain how it works in Pro AV. For example, if you want to get an HDR video onto an SDR source, etc., etc. So tons of great video content, educational purpose. So is sdvoe.org/academy. And for anything generic, if you just want to know more about SDVoE, is the sdvoe.org. Myself, you can reach me at stremblay@semtech.com, or there at the bottom, you have my LinkedIn shortcut.
Amazing. Thank you, Stephane. Same thing on the OpenAV Cloud side is if you'd love to find out more about this standard, what it does, how it benefits you, but also if you'd like to join, you can head to openav.cloud today. There's a little contact us button. Feel free to reach out to the Alliance itself. Same thing, if you'd also would like to find out information about Xyte as a company, we're part of this standard. We love it. We wave the flag, as do all the other contributing members and many, many more. of the founding members as well. And of course, if you'd like to reach out to me, you can reach me at andrew@xyte.io or my LinkedIn. Before we let everyone go, and before I let you go, Stephane, we did have a couple quick questions I do want to address that came in from the audience. One's first is about SDVoE. They were asking about what's next. Any new feature set? Is the ASIC being upgraded? The API changing? What's next for SDVoE?
Yes, all of the above are true. Every 6 months, we're coming up with a new firmware, a new API, a new higher level software control system. When we say new, it's just an evolution. Obviously, we are never invalidating previous versions, but we come up with new features. So come on our website. We specified what's being new, but every 6 months, twice a year, we are releasing new features. So one of the big feature that was released, for example, last firmware, was 802.1x in terms of security. Port authentication was required for certain installations, and then we added that to our API and firmware. That's just an example. We are in continuous evolvement over time.
Awesome, thank you. We had another question that asked about if using the cloud provides system management of the media system. Can a company deploy their own cloud server and incorporate AI? I'll take that one quickly. As it relates to the OpenAV Cloud, the OpenAV Cloud is a great resource to see which vendors and manufacturers are supporting this open API structure to then support those software vendors, one of them being Xyte. Of course, we're not the only one out there, but to support software vendors like ourselves to give you a solution of full management of those media systems, totally vendor agnostic. In addition to that, to the question about incorporating AI and maybe even running it on your own cloud or your own servers, is part of Xyte's commitment back to the OpenAV Cloud standard is we also open up our APIs, meaning that once all the vendors are able to communicate or we integrate to those open communicating vendors, we then on the back end package everything up into a nice clean API for you to use to make your own integration on your own systems that much easier. So that's kind of how we're contributing as well to the standard. A question for you, Stephane, it was about actually that medical example. Was they were wondering if that medical AI does exist today, the use case that you were giving, or is that a future state kind of example?
No, it does exist today. We call that space integrated OR, and the tools for the surgeon are definitely a reality. One company that's really prevalent in that to provide such AI plus SDVoE functionality is Advantech. I highly encourage you to go see Advantech products. They are certainly one of the leader in that space. Awesome,
thank you. Another question came in from the audience about what are the standards that are involved to make all this interop possible. Truly one of the biggest parts of this is simply opening up APIs. Open APIs is pretty much that standard, especially from the cloud side, that allows the interop of everything. And I think the big thing to take away from this as an audience member is demanding a better solution that supports standards like Open API that benefit SDVoE adoption and OpenAV Cloud adoption. So interop between hardware and interop in the cloud for monitoring and management. Stephane, was there anything else you wanted to add to that about what standards are involved to make this possible?
Well, no, I think you cover it right. I think we are at the SDVoE in terms of beating the standards to provide an abstraction layer to the hardware underneath. For Pro AV hardware is definitely the leading standards in that space. Maybe not the only one, but the leading one, and certainly the most interoperable one. And the interoperability is because the API is not only a standards where people need to abide by, it's fully described how to interface and maintained by Semtech. Semtech is investing so much on evolving that API layer and maintaining it to provide interoperability.
So I think we have time for one last question that came in from the audience, and it was, how extensible is the SDVoE API for third-party control platforms? They're asking specifically around integration of like Node-RED, MQTT, REST without the SDVoE server.
So it is extendable. You have to contact us, Semtech. So we give you access to the documentation, but it's really wide open. We also give for the people wanting to have basic control interface. We provide what we call BAVM, calls for Blue River AV Management, and this is entirely free. But you have to contact us, sign the NDA, make sure that you are within our ecosystem, and then you have everything you need.
Incredible. Well, I think with that, we're going to sign off here. Stephane, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today on this webinar. Amazing interaction from the audience. So clearly you hit on a great chord here related to the topics for SDVoE and Semtech. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew. My pleasure.
For the audience, as we close up, I'm leaving this slide up here for any last people that want to reach out. Again, if you want to reach out to the SDVoE Alliance and learn more, head to that sdvoe.org/academy. If you want to find out more about Semtech, of course, one of the founding manufacturer behind SDVoE, you can head to semtech.com or reach out to Stephane directly at his LinkedIn or email below. Same on the Xyte and OpenAV Cloud. Please head to openav.cloud. Check out the contributing and founding members of that standard for management and monitoring around the Open API standard. If you want to learn about Xyte, one of the founding members of the OpenAV Cloud, you can head to xyte.io. And of course, reach out to myself there at andrew@xyte.io or my LinkedIn. With that, I want to thank you, all the audience. We had awesome interaction, incredible engagement. This recording will be sent to you guys if you want to rewatch. And again, I think the biggest thing to take away from this is demand more, demand better, and demand openness and standards from your manufacturers and from your resellers so that you can ensure that you are getting the best when it comes to an AV system. And the way to do that is adopting standards like the OpenAV Cloud and SDVoE. So thank you again, Stephane, and thank you to the audience. Have a great rest of your day. Appreciate it.